Continuing on today, we are now on step 6. It's or I should say lesson 6, and it's an acrostic of the word recovery. And today's letter is the letter E. And the letter E stands for this. It says to evaluate all my relationships, offer forgiveness to those who have hurt me, and make amends for harm I've done to others, except when to do so would harm them or others. So, that's the whole reason that I believe New Life Fellowship is here, is because we are trying to break chains of every kind. The Bible teaches us that sin is a bondage. It's chains upon us, and these are steps that we can all take to life and have life more abundantly. That's what God says that we're supposed to be getting. And so today we're going to evaluate our relationships. We're going to forgive those that have hurt us, and we're going to make amends for those that we've hurt. And it's based on Ephesians chapter 4, verse 31 through 32. This is what it says. It says, get rid of all bitterness, rage, and anger, along with every form of malice. Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as Christ God forgave you. So this step has two parts, right? We've already said it. First, you forgive those that have hurt you. And second, you make amends to those that we've hurt. And we're going to talk about both of them. So why do I need to forgive people that have hurt me? Anyway, is there anyone here that has never been hurt by another person? How did I know you would answer me? All right, here we go. So we've all been hurt, and if she hasn't yet, she will be, right? So that's the truth. So why am I supposed to forgive those that hurt me? Well, because number one, God has already forgiven me. God's forgiven me. And if God has forgiven me, I should forgive other people as well. Colossians says to never hold a grudge. Remember the Lord forgave you, so you forgive others. And when I remember how much God forgives me, it makes it a whole lot easier to forgive other people. You will never have to forgive anyone as much as God has already forgiven you. And I'll never, and so if you have a hard time forgiving, many times it's because you don't feel forgiven yourself. But people who feel forgiven find it easier to forgive. And so people who feel unforgiven find it difficult to forgive others. And you need to realize that if God forgives me, God forgives you, then we need to forgive others. So number one, we are to forgive others because God has forgiven us. Number two, because resentment doesn't work. Resentment just doesn't work. It's unreasonable. Job 5:2 says, worry yourself to death with resentment would be foolish, senseless thing to do. And so resentment is unreasonable, it's unhelpful, and it's unhealthy. Job says that it's foolish because it's illogical to hold resentment. And resentment causes you to do stupid things, right? And resentment will cause you to hurt yourself more than the other person. Ecclesiastes says it's foolish to harbor a grudge. Job 18:4 says you're only hurting yourself with anger. It's unhelpful. Why? Because you always hurt more than somebody else. In other words, when you are filled with resentment, you'll get angry and you'll get resentful, but you're not hurting them. You're worrying, you're stewing, you're spewing, you're all upset about it, and it's not bothering them at all most of the time. And somebody may have hurt you 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago in your life, and you're still resentful about it, but it isn't affecting them at all. But you're still hung up on it, and it's still hurting you. It's still making you miserable, and you haven't forgotten it. Resentment can't change the past. The only thing it can do is sour your future. Resentment can't change the past. It can't correct the problem. It doesn't change the person. It doesn't even hurt that person. It only hurts you. It makes you miserable. And does it make you feel any better? No. You never hear anyone say, I feel so good because I'm mad at that person. You ever heard anyone say that? No, you don't say that. Why? Because when you're mad, when you're resentful, you feel miserable inside. Meanwhile, that person that you're resentful at doesn't feel anything. They're going about whistling Dixie. Everything's good for them. The most unhappy people I know, those I know that are carrying a grudge. Job 21 says this, some men stay healthy till the day they die. Others have no happiness at all. They live and die with bitter hearts. You know anyone like that seems to be bitter all the time, always carrying a grudge, never seems to be happy, everything bothers them, every person bothers them, it's this, that, and the other thing. No one can ever measure up to their standard. You know anyone like that? No? Are you like that? Bible says right here that some men will stay happy and others will live and die with bitter hearts. What a horrible ending to live. What a horrible thing to have your life be so consumed with resentment and anger and bitterness that it ruins every part of the glorious days that God has in our future. How sad. Research has shown that the unhealthiest emotion people have, the most unhealthy emotion, is resentment. It's like a cancer. It eats you alive. It's poison to your system, and it has physical consequences. And you ever say that guy's a pain in the neck? Maybe he really is. Maybe the resentment and anger and frustration you have against that person is actually causing you physical pain. It's not uncommon. Dr. S.I. McMillan wrote a book that showed the two greatest causes of physical problems in life are guilt and resentment. And he said this. He said, it's not so much what you eat, it's what eats you that matters. It's not so much what you eat, it's what eats you that really matters. When you're resentful, it makes you unhealthy. It has physical consequences, emotional consequences. It leads to depression. It leads to additional stress. It leads to fatigue. And nothing drains you quicker than being bitter. Nothing drains you quicker. You're thinking of that person, that former girlfriend or boyfriend, husband, wife, ex-wife, teacher who embarrassed you, brother or sister, relative, neighbor that did something to you, that person that never told you that they loved you, that person that dropped you like a hot potato and never gave you any reason why, that person that ripped you, and here's all it does. You think about it and it just drains you of energy. You wake up frustrated, you go to bed frustrated and exhausted, and nothing changes. You're just harboring this bitterness, this hurt, this resentment, and it just prolongs the hurt. It's like it's like slow motion emotional suicide. It's like being pecked to death by a duck. It just goes on and on and on and on, and it never ends, but every time it just takes a little bit more of who you are until there's nothing left of you except the hollow shell that's filled with junk. Why do you need to forgive? So you can be whole again, right? You need to forgive those that hurt you, not for their sake, for your sake. So A, we forgive because God tells us to. B, or number two, we forgive because, I lost the title of it, but we forgive because resentment doesn't work. And we forgive number three because I need forgiveness in the future. I'm not done screwing up in life. How about you? The only one that I know is perfect here is Ron. Other than that, everyone else is going to be screwing up again, right? And so, because, and everybody's looking around, who's Ron? I want to see a perfect guy. He's not. Mark 11:25, when you are praying, right? I'm going to need forgiveness in the future. Mark 11:25, when you're praying, first forgive anyone you are holding a grudge against, so that your heavenly Father will forgive your sins too. How about that? You holding a grudge against someone and you're praying? Better let it go, especially if you want forgiveness again. Unless you got it perfect, like Ron, then you're okay. Resentment blocks feeling God's forgiveness in your life. Resentment will block you sensing the forgiveness of God. The Bible says we can't receive what we are unwilling to give, right? The Bible teaches us that as you sow, so shall you reap. You're going to keep sowing resentment, guess what you're going to get back? Yeah, right. So it's dangerous to pray that Lord's Prayer, right? Remember the Our Father? Remember that one line? It's a dangerous thing to say. Forgive us our debts as we forgive those who sin against us. Woo-hoo! How are you going to stand on a scale of 1 to 10? How's God's forgiveness to you going to be based upon how you've forgiven someone that has offended you? Forgive us our debts as we forgive those who sin against us. Lord, forgive me as much as we forgive everybody else. Do you really want that? Is that really the deal you want to make with God? that he will forgive you the same way you've forgiven others that have hurt you, I'd rather fall on the grace of God and say, Lord, help me with this. I can't stand on my own merit. So we need to forgive other people because God's forgiven us, because resentment doesn't work, and we're going to need forgiveness in the future, and you don't want to burn the bridge that you're going to have to walk across again, right? So forgiveness is a two-way street, if you will. A guy named John Wesley one time said, I can never forgive that person, never. Somebody said that to him, John Wesley. I can never forgive that person. They've hurt me. And John Wesley said, then I hope you never sin, because we all need what we don't want to give, right? So don't burn the bridge that you need to walk across. So, okay, Pastor, I sort of agree that, yeah, I need to forgive this person or let that resentment go. How do I do it? How do I forgive that person that hurt me last week, yesterday, this morning? How do I forgive that person that hurt me 10, 20, 30 years ago? How do I forgive that person? Well, here's the number one thing. Number one, you reveal the hurt. You admit it. You admit it. You let it out. You face it. You be honest with yourself. You can't get over hurt until you admit that you do hurt. You can't get over it until you admit that it's there. And I don't know why, but we don't want to admit the times that people we love have hurt us. We don't always, people think that you can't love someone and be angry at them at the same time. Apparently you've never been married if that's the case. But we can. We can love and we can be angry at the same time. But, and you can. But you can't forgive what you don't own up to, right? That people have hurt you. So the very first thing of forgiving someone is to reveal that hurt. Admit it. Put it down on a piece of paper. Why a piece of paper? Pastor, for weeks now, you've been talking about making lists for this and lists for that and writing this down and writing that down. Why? Because then it gets very specific. Something happens when it goes from our minds, through our eyes, to our fingertips, onto a piece of paper. It's now black and white. It's in front of us. It has to become specific and clear in our minds. So we make a list. Believe it or not, I almost hate to say this, but we make a list of the people that have hurt us. And it's not a revenge list. That's not what this is. It's just a list of acknowledging this person hurt me. And it's not necessarily about self-pity either. It's just recognizing that this part of my life is hurt because of this circumstance, right? And we'll deal with the circumstance eventually, but right now it's just an identification, and you write it down. You go to see a doctor, and they're going to inspect you, or whatever that's called. What's that called? They're going to examine you. Thank you. So they're going to examine you. They're going to take your temperature. They're going to test your blood pressure. They're going to look in your eyes and listen to your heart, and you know what they're going to do after that? They're going to send you a bill. No. Before they send you a bill, they're going to take all of that information and they're going to what? Yeah, this means writing. Come on, guys, work with me, right? This means writing. They're going to write it all down. Now it's in black and white. It's clear. It's specific. It's direct. It's purposed, right? What do I do with the hurts that I have? Same thing as I did with that personal inventory that I took 2 weeks ago. I'm going to write it down. I'm going to be specific. When so-and-so did that, it hurt me, and I don't know how to get rid of it. That's a list. You see, you have three options. You have three options when people hurt you, and here's what they are. First, stay on the platform. Three options that anyone has when you're hurt by another person. Number one, you can repress it. You can repress it, just pretend that it didn't happen. You just kind of overlook it like it never existed. Here's the problem with repressing. It always comes out somewhere else in your life. You can't repress. That's the problem. You can try. You can repress that hurt, but it's going to come out sooner or later in some way. So it never really works. It always pops up somewhere. So you can repress it or you can suppress it. Suppress it. You just make it sound, it's no big deal. It's just one time. It's just, and they did the best that they could do. So there's repress it, where we try to hide it and act like it didn't ever happen. Suppress it, where we try to make it smaller than perhaps it really was. Or you can confess it. You can confess it. You can just say, it really did happen. My parents didn't do the best they could when they raised me. And I didn't do the best I could when I did this, and that person didn't do their best to me. But you just confess it, you admit it, you put it down there, and it's a way of just saying, identification, seeing who and where you're at. See, there's not going to be any closure to that circumstance. There's not going to be any closure to that resentment until there is disclosure. There's no closure until there's disclosure. There's nothing that goes away until it comes to light. And that's why you have to do that. So you make that list, and it becomes something that's specific. So you admit it. That's the first thing you do when it comes to forgiving someone else. Now here's the next one, and here's the tough one. Number 2, you release the offender. You release the offender. That person that hurt you, you let it go. You stop holding on to that hurt. Now that sounds easy, but it's not. How do you do that? How do you release an offender? You do it by forgiving them. It's the only way that you can release them, is you've got to forgive them. You don't wait for them to ask for forgiveness. There's a good chance that's never going to happen. You don't wait for them to ask for forgiveness. You forgive them whether they ask for forgiveness or not, because you're doing it for your sake. You're not doing it for them. You're doing it so you get better, so that you get healthy. You do it whether they ask for it or not. Why? Because God forgave you, and you're going to need forgiveness in the future, and resentment doesn't work. It just makes, so you release that offender, and you forgive them for your own sake. Now, maybe you've tried this, and maybe you haven't. Maybe there's someone that has hurt you, and you've tried to forgive them, and it keeps coming back. Anyone ever been there? 2 of us. You guys live such blessed lives. Me and you, right? We've tried to forgive, all 3, right? We've tried to forgive other people, and those feelings keep coming back, right? The bitterness rises up again, right? The resentment rises up again, and it keeps coming back again and again and again. So what do? I was supposed to forgive them. Here's what you do when that happens. Forgive them again. That's why, listen, that's why Jesus said, when somebody asked him, how often should I forgive another person? He said, 70 times. I see it. Go ahead, say it, Flo. Say it. Come on, Flo, say it. You were saying it. I saw it. 70 times 7. That's how often you have to do it. And you know what? The deeper the hurt is, the more often you have to do it. And so every time that resentment starts to come up, you say, Lord, I forgive them. I forgive them, Lord. I'm letting that hurt go. I am releasing them from this. I am releasing myself from this. I am getting out of this trap of bitterness and resentment. I am letting it go. How often do you have to do it? Say it, Flo. 70 times 7. Anybody know what 70 times 7 is? Math teacher? 449? 490 times. How do I know when I have forgiven them? Who said that? What'd you say? Who said what? I heard a voice. 490 times, right? How do I know when I've forgiven someone? Come on. When you can think of that person and it doesn't hurt anymore. Now, I want you to think of that person that you're holding a grudge against right now, that you have resentment in your heart against, no matter how far back it goes. When you think of them, does it hurt? Guess what? You're somewhere from 0 to 490, right? Lord, I recognize that this hurt is here. And Lord, it has crippled me in my life. It has robbed me of joy. It has taken away my peace. It has colored the relationships I'm in today. God, I see that this has hurt me. God, I don't want to be in bondage to this anymore. Lord, I see it. Lord, I forgive them. Now, Lord, help me to get through this, to let them go and to never let that bother me again. How often do I do it? Until it doesn't hurt anymore. Here's the amazing thing. It works. It works. I've done this. It works. I've done this in my own life. I have had people attack me, and I've learned how to forgive them. And sometimes it's just like, okay, I forgive them, and it's done. And others have been, I have to forgive them over and over and over again. And in some of those relationships have been restored. Some of those relationships have not. You see, if you've gone through something like a divorce or something, you're never going to forget that. But you can be free of the pain from that circumstance. I tell people this, like on the back of my neck right here is a scar, right? That scar was from a neck surgery I had like 25 years ago. I was in pain and had a ruptured disc in my neck, and they went and they operated on me, and I went through all of the recovery process, and I can reach back there and I can touch that scar, and every time I touch that scar, I am reminded of that experience in my life. But guess what? It doesn't hurt anymore. I can touch it all day long and I can remember it, but it doesn't hurt me. And folks, when you start to forgive those people that you are holding resentment and bitterness and grudges against, when you start to forgive them the way God tells us to do, you will come to the point where you can touch that experience in your life, but it doesn't hurt anymore. You know what we call that? Freedom! For he who the Son sets free is free indeed. You see why we're doing this? This has nothing to do with drugs and alcohol. What people don't realize about addiction is that drugs and alcohol 99% of the time are the symptoms of the problem. They're not the real problems. The real problems are underneath that we try to self-medicate through. These are the real problems. Resentment, lack of feeling love, no peace in our heart, no joy, grudges, bitterness, pain, loss. These are the things that God wants to heal inside of us. So how do you know when they're forgiven? You can think about them. It doesn't hurt anymore. You keep forgiving them and keep making that promise to yourself. I'm forgiving them now. I'm letting this go. I'm releasing them from it. I'm not holding it against them anymore. I'm not allowing these things to dominate my thinking anymore. These are the conversations that you need to have with yourself and God, and that will go away. Eventually, somewhere from 0 to 490, you'll be free from that, right? And you know, here's the thing. It's not always possible or even advisable for you to go back to somebody that's hurt you. The circumstances have changed. Maybe your parents hurt you and they never knew about it. You know, for you to go back 40 years later and said, well, you did this to me, that might just kind of blow them away, right? Maybe that first marriage or something like that turned sour and those people are remarried. It's probably not a great idea for you to go back into that scenario like that. So what do? Well, there's something that's done that's called the empty chair technique, right? Probably you've heard of this, and what you do is if you realize that you have to say some of these things, that there's things you just have to get off your chest, and yet it's not appropriate to go back into those areas and have those conversations, you use the empty chair technique. You set up an empty chair and you set it down in front of you, and you imagine that person is sitting in the chair, and you basically talk to the chair and you say, you know what, there's some things I need to say to you. There's some things I have to get off my chest, right? And things that have been hurt, and you lay it all out, right? A lot of times, parents or children, when their parents pass, I've seen this a number of times in ministry, they are hurt over not being able to say things to their parents before they passed. And we recommend this technique. Try this, you know. It helps you to get rid of this burden and to let it go, right? Maybe another way, so you talk to that chair and you lay it all out. And then when you are done and you have expressed yourself, you leave it there. You leave it there. Don't pick it up again. When it comes back into your mind, you say, you know what, I've dealt with this. I've forgiven this person and I'm moving on. This is not easy. This is hard work. This is the kind of stuff that people run away from. But this is the kind of stuff that if you will face and do in your life, you will grow. You'll grow. You'll feel better. Right? So there's this empty chair technique. Another thing to do is to write a letter that you're never going to mail. And I tell people to do this a lot. Write it all out. There we are, write it again, right? Write it all out. Write that whole hurt out. Tell them how you feel, and then burn it. Or throw it away. Don't mail it. You know, sometimes it's just not appropriate to go back to that situation, but you have to deal with what you have to deal with. And so that's another way that you do. And so I admit the issue. I release the offender, and now what do? The third step is that I replace my hurt with God's peace. I replace my hurt with God's peace. There are some horrible things that people have done to each other. Maybe you have been hurt horribly, and it's unfair, the things that have been done to us at times, right? And there's a part of us that says, well, why should they get off scot-free? Why should they get off without being punished? Maybe you were sexually abused. Why should they get off scot-free? Okay, so there's a line there. A terrible example, Jim. Because there is a line where you go to authorities, right? But what do you do? Why should they get off scot-free? They're not going to get off scot-free. You're going to let God deal with it. You're going to let God settle it, because the Bible says that every man, woman, child, everyone is going to stand before God and give an accounting of what they have done in their life. That means when you were hurt by that person, intentionally, unintentionally, when you were abused, when you were this, when you were that, sooner or later they're going to have to stand before God. You know what? That's why, can I say it this way? That's why there's a hell. Punishment for those that do not accept what God has. So there's going to be an accounting. They're not going to get off scot-free for hurting you. And guess what? You and I aren't going to get off scot-free for hurting others, which is why we have to deal with it too, right? Because there's two steps to this, right? There is forgiving those that have hurt me, and then there's this second step, which is I make amends to those I've hurt. And that's because not only have I been hurt by people, but I have hurt people, and so have you. Not only have you been hurt, but you have hurt others as well. And so this second half of this step is every bit as important as the first half. And because unresolved relationships are the root of so many problems that we have, they prevent recovery from happening. So you have to take this second step. Hebrews 12 says, "Watch out that no bitterness takes root among you, for as it springs up, it causes deep trouble, hurting many in their spiritual lives." So how do I make amends? Well, you do the exact same thing as just about everything else. You start by making a list of those you've harmed. You say, "I've never harmed anyone." Who are you kidding? Right? Boy, I can rattle off a list right there. The only one that can is Ron, because he's perfect, but you know. Right? You ever heard anyone run? Careful what you say here. Close enough. You can't think of anybody? Well, here's a few starters. You ever borrowed something that you didn't repay? You ever broke a promise? You ever been over-controlling towards someone? Have you ever been overly possessive? Ever been hypercritical of a person? Ever gossiped about somebody? Ever spoke down about somebody? Ever been physical or emotionally abusive towards someone? Do I need to keep going on? No, there's people that we've hurt. Anyone you've ever lied to, been unfaithful to? The list goes on. So you make a list. How have I harmed that person? And then you think about this. How should I make amends to them? Well, how would you want someone to apologize to you? It's probably the way you should apologize to them, right? And so you also do this. You make restitution as you're able. You make restitution as you're able. Actually, before I get to that, let me back up because I'm getting ahead of myself. Think of how you would make amends to someone. Luke 6:31. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you, right? So there you go. There's that. So if someone was going to apologize to me, how would I want it done? And there's some things you should also look at when you're considering to make an amends. Carly, do you have a way of bringing up the very first slide again after the title where we talk about step 6? It says evaluate. Yeah. So look, there it says, make amends for harm I've done to others, except when to do so would harm them or others. So there is this qualifying statement of when I should try to repair things or make amends and when maybe I need to do something else. And here's some of the things that help to qualify that. Number one is time. Ecclesiastes 8:6 says there's a right time and a right way to do everything. So you don't necessarily just drop the bomb on someone that you want to make amends with. If it's a family member, you probably shouldn't do it right when they're laying their head on the pillow or something like that. You do it at a time that's best for them and not yourself necessarily. Attitude. Ephesians 4:15 says, speak the truth in a spirit of love. So how would you apologize to someone? Well, with humility, sincerity, simply say what you did was wrong. Don't make justification. Don't make excuses for it. Don't talk about their part in it. Just accept your responsibility and say, hey, I'm sorry. I recognize now that I did that. Just a few weeks ago, I had this happen to me. There was someone that I had made a commitment to in the church, and I don't want to go into a lot of detail, but I made a commitment, and the bottom line is I completely and totally dropped the ball, completely and totally dropped it, and years went by, and I saw that person again. And as soon as I did that, as soon as I saw that person, I was reminded that I had dropped the ball on the commitment that I had made. And I went up to that person and I just said, look, I am so sorry. I don't have any good excuse. I just didn't do it. I just didn't do what I said I would do. And I dropped the ball, and I'm sorry. That person had never forgotten, because it was like 8 years. That person had never forgotten that I had made those commitments. And when I apologized, they began to cry. How far back do you have to go? I don't know. I had to go back to experience that was 8 years ago. Right? How far back do you have to go? I don't know. How do you handle it? I don't know. Just when you do handle it, be honest. Just be honest. And be sorry. Right? So time's an issue. Attitude's an issue. The other thing is make restitution where it's possible. Right? If you borrowed something, return it. If you borrowed money, pay it back if you can. These are the type of things that make amends. And there's a guy named Zacchaeus in the Bible, and Jesus came to his house. Zacchaeus was a tax collector, and in those days, taxes were very much, the tax collectors worked for Rome, and Rome demanded this much money out of each person in the town, right? But the tax collectors would get Rome's portion and as much as they could for their own portion. And Zacchaeus apparently was like all the other tax collectors of that day and was ripping people off, and they were hated throughout the community. And Jesus came to his house and spoke to Zacchaeus, and Zacchaeus had a change of heart. He met Jesus Christ. He met Jesus Christ. And he said to Jesus, he says, you know what, I'm going to go back and I'm going to restore fourfold everything that I cheated people out of. And that's what he did. He went back to all those people and he paid them 4 times what he had stolen from them. Wonder how that looked. You know what it looked like? It looked like a man that meant business. Looked like a man had really met Christ. He was willing to in this case, he is literally willing to put his money where his mouth was, right? He made restitution where it's necessary. Let's talk about hurts a little bit deeper. There are some things that the more serious the offense, the less likely that you're going to be able to make restitution. Let's be honest. There are some things that you saying you're sorry just aren't going to fix, right? It's that simple. But you can't necessarily restore some of the things that you have taken away from other people, just like me. But don't underestimate the power of a sincere apology. Just put it out there. What you do is you go to that person at the right time. You say, I'm sorry, I was wrong. I don't deserve your forgiveness. But if you could, thanks, right? And you leave it at that. And then how do you know whether you should make amends? Remember we said this part again. Carly, could you bring up the second slide? If it's going to hurt someone or not, That's when you know. Is it appropriate? Proverbs says thoughtless words can wound as deeply as a sword, but wisely spoken words can heal. So again, there are some situations it would be unwise to contact that person you hurt. Some situations you wouldn't want to go back in because it would open up a whole can of worms and probably make the situation worse, or you could harm an innocent party. And you don't want to go back to an old girlfriend that's married or an old boyfriend that's married now. You just probably need to leave that one alone because there's an innocent party involved there, right? So what do? You use that empty chair technique again. You write that letter that you're never going to send, and you balance the ledger. You just balance the ledger, right? And Romans 12:18 says, if it's possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone, right? So that's what this is about. Last thing we're going to talk about is refocusing my life. Because look, if you are just filled with anger and resentment, and it has just been such a big part of your life, and now you're starting to get rid of it, there's going to be that empty space. So what are you going to fill it with? I got an idea. Fill it with God. Fill it with Christ. Refocus your life on God. Right? The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience. And I can never remember the ones after that, but there's more. Trust me, there's more. Right? And fill your life with those things. Refocus your life. Refocus your life on doing God's will in the relationships that you have now. And that's what recovery is all about. And so here's the point. Here's the point. Listen, as long as you focus on somebody you resent, you're allowing them to control you. Did you get that? As long as you're focusing on someone you resent, you're allowing them to control you. And some of you are still allowing people from your past to control your present. Been there, done that. As long as you resent them, they control you. And if you continue to resent them, you will eventually resemble the person you resent. If you continue to resent them, and that's how it works. That's how it works. Because what you focus on is what you become. That's why I'm telling you, refocus your life on God. And the good news is God wants to deal with the relational garbage in our lives. He's not afraid of the mess, right? Not afraid of the mess at all. And He knows how much you can handle. And He will help you to deal with these things one layer at a time. One layer at a time. And if you're willing, as God will keep working with you to be free of these things, to be free of the pain, and to live the life that He's already created for you. So, Job 11 says, put your heart right, reach out to God, then face the world again. Firm, courageous. Then all your troubles will fade from your memory like floods that are past and remembered no more. So, refocus, put your heart right, talk to God, make the list again. Fix what you can fix, let go of what needs let go of, and refocus your life on God. And your life will get better, I promise you, because God promises it. So I don't have to deliver, God delivers. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Don't withdraw. Don't hide in your shell anymore. Don't sweep it under the rug. Don't minimize it. Call a spade, and deal with it. And deal with it.